Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of ValueCast. It's a podcast where we talk about the value of people and services, specifically within the extended workforce arena, but in general services procurement as well. So today, I've got Dustin with me. Nice to see you, Dustin.
Good to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You're certainly wrapped up warm from what I can see. So that's
Yes,
all good.
the spring weather has gone back to the cold side of the mix.
Yeah, I wish it would make his mind up.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Yeah. So the topic today, it's actually one topic I've been spending a lot of time on over the last, I suppose, since I was sort of starting up my new business over a year ago. I've been focusing a lot on services, on compliance, but also the freelance industry, talent pools, etc. Because we've seen, a huge evolution over the last few years around the different types of channels that are available to source talent into buyers. Um, so the topic we're talking about today is specifically around how we cultivate a powerful network of freelancers. And Dustin, I'll let you introduce yourself first before we go in further. So, tell everyone about yourself.
Yeah, so quick thing about me, and then maybe I can tell a little bit about Malt as well, and just the context that I'm coming from as we talk about that. So I am our head of product marketing at Malt, in addition to also being responsible for all of Malt's marketing activities in the Netherlands, where I'm based. Also for our listeners, just some context, I have the Dutch citizenship and nationality, but was raised in the U.S., hence my American accent when I'm speaking, but my entire professional career and a big chunk of my academic career has been in the Netherlands. So I'm definitely coming at this from a European perspective.
Yeah.
Work-wise, I'm jumping back and forth between hyper global activities, looking how we can kind of grow Malt with our mission, and then local things to succeed in the Netherlands, which in terms of freelancing is one of the most mature and competitive markets in Europe. About Malt itself, Malt is Europe's largest freelance marketplace. We have over 700,000 freelancers operating in our system. The way we try and talk about it is explain that our goal is to really give everybody the power of choice in choosing the work that they want to do and who they do it with, whether that's with our
Mhm.
freelance community or the clients that are hiring them. And we have technology that powers all of that to make it really easy to always connect, do great work, and have great results.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. So you get to see the best of both worlds. You get to see, how the product can impact all of the freelancers and buyers that utilize your system. But you also get the joy of making sure it's being marketed correctly as well. So,
Exactly.
sounds like a very interesting role. And how long have you been in the industry? Is it something that you've always been
So
passionate about?
So funny enough, this is my first time being in the freelance space, but I actually have an HR background. My
Mhm,
master's degree is in HR, and I started my career working in the people space
mhm,
before switching into marketing, still in HR technology. So I've always been at least adjacent to this specific topic around freelancing, and then
yeah.
I've been with Malt for about 2.5 years now, getting more into the thick of it.
Great, great. Yeah, it's a really interesting. I I don't like to call it industry. Interesting way of looking at how businesses procure talent, and it's actually sometimes we can overcomplicate things, and instead of making things as simple as they should be, which is about attracting the right talent. Um,
Absolutely.
so when we look at this topic, the freelance industry is just growing and growing. There's been a huge number of layoffs over the last 5-10 years that you continue to see large companies move people out, and you then tend to see a huge amount of people take not necessarily a risk, but take the initiative to start upon their own, right? And I'm sure you continue to see that with the volumes of workers and freelancers that join your system. But why do you think why is this important to you? Why do you think it's important for buyers and for freelancers to be a part of such a powerful network?
So I think there's a few elements that come into this. I think first zooming out is just with what we're really trying to accomplish at Malt with our vision while we were founded is to provide people with greater choice and flexibility in their work. In this case, this is around the freelancing as well as how you want to build your teams, whether it's fully fixed employees or maybe a mix of fixed and flexible
Mhm.
employees. So that's really where it starts from and kind of drives all of our decision making with that mission. And when it comes to building the community, the other thing that really guided us from our founding, when you talk to our founders about it, is that what they saw is a lot of technological and process inefficiencies and an overall bad experience for clients and freelancers alike. So a lot of stuff was really manual, basically just big databases, nothing else. And that's for, both sides of the marketplace, if you will. The other thing that I think was a big challenge they wanted to address was the fact that freelancers are frequently treated like a product and not as a core stakeholder. And that's something that we wanted to flip on its head a little bit with Malt. So Alex Freddie, one of our co-CEOs, whenever he's meeting with clients, and we're talking really big corporate clients or smaller ones, he says, "You're not my key client. The freelancers are my key client." And that kind of expresses our priority. So how does that manifest? Let me get to actually answering your question, building that kind of.
It makes perfect sense. All of these people that take this approach are, invaluable to businesses, and they're selling their services, so they're just as important as a technology to help them get work.
Exactly. And so what we do is we have a really big community team dedicated to our freelancers. So there's about 50 full-time employees working on this in different countries, and they have different tasks dedicated to helping our freelancers. Some of it's more kind of community management, where we set up events, meetups, get-togethers to help people build a network and have that sense of belonging that can sometimes
Yeah.
be absent when you're a solopreneur as a freelancer doing things by
Mhm.
yourself. We also have a lot of focus on content and learning and education. So we'll have webinars or blog posts really guiding freelancers on how to upskill themselves, sometimes just about freelance fundamentals, sometimes about specific job skill categories. And then on top of that, we also have project partners. So these are an equivalent. There's some important differences, but you can almost view it as kind of a professional recruiting team for the freelancers. Obviously, they're not hiring fixed employees, but they're there to work directly with the clients to scope out what the processes look like. And then on top of that, to also work with freelancers to make sure that they understand what they're getting into, doing all of those things.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the high touch human aspect of it. And
Yeah.
underneath that is a lot of technology. So one of the things that I want to emphasize to our listeners is Malt is very much a product and technology company, but
Mhm.
the way you'll hear us talk a lot is more about the human side of it, because ultimately that's what we're here for. Technology facilitates it,
Mhm.
but it's the human connection that's the most important part.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. It's there are a lot of wonderful service offerings out there at the moment in the marketplace, which provide um, what I would call much more client focused, or client centric, right? Which is extremely important because the bar is important. Um, but I don't always see that they really truly understand the value of cultivating it. And you will see some models, right, where they have more of a closed pool, right? It's focused on one specific client versus having a what I would call an opened talent marketplace, where actually it's about the worker being connected to the businesses rather than the other way around, right? It's a really interesting concept. Like, are you seeing the talent and the freelancers that work with Malt sort of grow because of that and because of the benefits that you offer and provide them, or yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
So I think there's some variance between the freelancers
yeah.
that are doing things with us. So what I will say is that for a big chunk of our freelancers, we're not necessarily their main source of projects. Just
Mhm.
statistically speaking, in most countries, the main source is their own network.
Yep.
So what we want to do is be their second option. For some of them, we're their first option, where they're getting most of their projects through us. But
Yep.
at least they always include us. But there's also that sense of belonging and being cultivated there, and then having a product that just makes it really easy to do that and make it
Mhm.
effortless so people can focus on the work that they're doing.
Mhm.
So I'd say that's kind of our main focus area with that. For our freelancers, we do some things specifically to help support those who are doing a lot of work through us. So we have a program called the Super Malter program
Mhm.
that provides different perks and access to different
Mhm.
things to really nurture and take care of them. But it's never locking anybody else out of the basic things. So
Mhm.
that's one thing we do that we think is a nice extra. Another thing is for our management consulting and interim management category. We
Mhm.
refer to that as Malt strategy. There's a personal consultant relations manager that works with them on that, just because these are highly skilled, highly valuable people who are uh, charging high amounts of money because of their expert services. So that can be anywhere between 500 to 2,000 or more euros
Okay.
per day for their services. So there's that extra touch. Then the final thing that we do on this is we also have something we call our freelance advisory board. So this is a group of freelancers across skill sets and across countries. There's roughly 15 of them who work directly with Malt leadership as well as with our product teams and other teams to make sure that we are enacting policies that are fair and in the interest of freelancers in a healthy marketplace, and are providing them with the features they need to be successful in there. What we're trying to do is just help provide people with a sense of belonging, a connection with other people. So that's, I think, work-wise, employees are also seeking for that. So there is a bit of an overlap, but it's not necessarily a direct benefit. And I think the other thing is also just making sure that our policies and our product are there to make it as easy as possible for people to succeed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can definitely see that. And do you find that, with the freelancers that you have, they are quite, once they start working with clients, they tend to try and stick with the same client base, or because of the way you set up as a business, you find that actually it's more about being able to do work and actually be rated for the work, and then being available, other clients that are using Malt can actually see how good these people are. Or do you tend to see quite a broad range of what freelancers do versus a narrow approach?
Our freelancers tend to have a good amount of repeat customers once they're doing
Mhm.
projects. We've
Yeah.
actually recently released a report called Freelancing in Europe that does deep dives into a
Mhm.
lot of data about this, and this is one of them. So I'd encourage listeners to download that report. It's available on our website and our resource center. And one of the things that we see is that freelancers really do like coming back to clients. One of the most important things to them is the quality of the client relationship and driving that. So they do come to that. And at the same time, they're also getting a lot more projects. You see also variance based on the skill set. So for instance, someone more on the management consulting side of things, they could have a longer project. Maybe they're doing change management for 6 to 12 months. Then they're
Mhm.
embedded with one main client. Whereas you may have somebody else who's in a bit more of a scalable or creative field, say whether that's a graphic designer or even a software developer who's managing multiple projects for multiple clients simultaneously.
Mhm. Okay, cool. And one thing I have been interested in sort of discussing with you is, there is a variety of models out there, right, that clients can utilize. And obviously, it's obviously about understanding what the client needs and what value they can be given, right? It doesn't always work that way. But you've got managed service providers, you've got vendor management systems, you've got platforms that call themselves direct sourcing platforms that have a slightly different approach to what you do. How do you how do you find fitting into that mix? Or do you see yourself as you don't get too bothered about being involved in that, and you just focus on what you can provide for your freelancers, which ultimately provides value to the client?
Um, I think your last point is probably the most true with what we do,
Mhm.
and then I'll add some nuance to that. So Malt has been set up that we can operate fully standalone as an independent platform, as well as in conjunction with the VMS system, VMS parties, with the
Mhm.
MSPs to be working along with that. So it's really based around kind of what the clients need, as well as what we feel can provide sustainable business for Malt, as well as a fair experience to the freelancers.
Mhm.
So, because basically what Malt does as a standalone is we offer a really powerful search engine that makes it easy for
Mhm.
clients to find the perfect freelance match, as well as an automated matching tool powered by AI and algorithms.
Mhm.
So, interesting note for freelancers listening to this, Malt takes a different approach than, say, the job board model, where something gets posted and you apply and you have to compete
Yeah.
with
Mhm.
hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people. Instead, the clients come to you. So
Okay.
the upside and downside is that it's passive for you. They have to come to you. So
Mhm.
sometimes you could be waiting for longer than you'd prefer.
Yeah.
But we also find that it yields better matches for our clients in
Mhm.
this regard. So, for instance, the average score that freelancers have had for the past 12 months, I was checking earlier this week, is a 4.9 out of 5. So
Mhm.
it's clearly that matching process seems to be working out quite well. It's not perfect every
Yeah.
time, but it's close.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're standalone with that kind of matching component, and then there's our freelance management system that makes it really easy to take care of all your contracting, reporting, those type of things on the client side as well as on the freelance side, and that's
Mhm.
all standalone. However, we have to integrate with the VMS. We have API configurations, we have processes that we can set up to do that, where we can definitely integrate with our clients, particularly for our larger enterprise clients
Great.
that may have a more formalized process. We do have to
Mhm.
accommodate that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the way this world of work continues to go, it's because of the multitude of options available. API integration is so important. So it's really good to hear that you do that. Do you find that you get much, a huge amount of resistance from other sort of software providers, uh, or managed services to actually understand what you do? Because I've come into this world. A year ago, I've worked 20 years for a VMS provider, right? And I've started to now really understand all these different sourcing channels. Um, and companies like yourself, they don't really get much time or understanding within a lot of those programs. And I'm still trying to work out why. Because when I look at what you provide and other providers in your area do, I can't see why you wouldn't want to bring in this type of channel from sourcing. So, what challenges do you see? If you understand what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah, so I think there are some challenges. Some of them are just technical, right? And when you're dealing
Mhm,
with technical challenges, usually the first conversations are starting with your commercial teams and then have to
mhm,
cascade down to the technical teams. And then you're dealing also with the client side. So there's three parties involved and multiple stakeholders that have different needs. So I think that's just kind of a question of effective communication and project management. That's making it sound simpler than it is, but I think that's where it can go wrong quite
mhm,
often. I think the other misconception that sometimes can exist within certain parties is that they worry that malt is not necessarily able to operate as a partner or a
mhm.
supplier in the sense that they're looking for, which is incorrect. But I think because we're capable of functioning standalone, there that creates that misconception. Whereas we're
Yeah.
fully able to plug in and integrate. And the other thing is, for instance, we can have a client who's using a VMS together with Malt for certain processes, for instance, particularly when it comes to kind of managing candidates in the database.
Mhm,
But then they may want to be using Malt just to be keeping track of the project status notifications there. So
mhm.
we can operate simply as a supplier where our talent database is connecting and then more of the human services are available there. But even for clients using a VMS or an MSP, the Malt platform is still really valuable to be using. And it doesn't mean it comes at the expense of existing software services that are already in place.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And I do honestly see that there is it's a slow shift, but I do see a shift where buyers are becoming a bit more savvy and not so worried about having, everything under one platform, right? Of course, right, you can integrate with VMS and make sure that the client has the holistic view on data and all those wonderful things. Um, but I am seeing a shift where clients, are actually and buyers are really happy with actually making sure they focus on the sourcing channel and getting the talent versus I need this holistic data approach, and I need to have every piece of data to make sure because what's the value in having all this data if you're not getting the talent that you need to do the jobs that they need to do? Um,
Exactly. I agree with that. And I think what you see across the space, if I think about, for instance, just not even just freelance staffing, but other parts of HR, you're seeing a bigger focus that is much more results oriented as HR is continuing kind of mature as a function. HR is not always running the freelance landscape, so I'm just referring
yeah,
to one
yeah,
potential
yeah,
stakeholder, but it's maturing in its ability to be much more impact and result focused. So then, those things change. And then also in the technology your space, you're seeing a lot of people wanting to focus more on adoption and ease of use when you're rolling platforms out, whether it's you're rolling Malt out as a freelance management system internally, or you're working on a recruitment tool like an ATS. You want it to be easy for your stakeholders and your hiring managers to use. And I think that's where you're seeing a certain degree of centralization where everything has to connect, but also
yeah.
more autonomy with specific tools. And I think that is better for the overall work situation and as we're improving our ability to build flexible and powerful teams.
Mm. No, that's great. That's great to hear. I did want to just focus a bit on the freelancers again, right? So to your points earlier, you as a Malt as a business very much value the freelancer as the most important part of the process, right? Your clients and buyers are obviously very important, um, but without the freelancers, you can't operate as a business, or the client can operate as a business either. What what top tips could you give to the freelancer industry about um, how to operate in this freelance world, right? Rather than like, are there things that Malt do to help, I suppose, not train, but cultivate how they operate as a freelancer versus the actual work they do? Because that's quite a difficult part. I'm in technically in the freelance world, right? I'm an independent. I run my own business, um, but people need help with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think the main thing, if I'm thinking about kind of starter freelancers that I'll speak to who are just getting into it, or
Mhm.
people who have maybe realized they can't only rely on their own network, so they're also, even though they've been freelancing for years, they haven't had to do a lot of selling. That
Yeah.
can feel really uncomfortable for a lot of people because they feel that if they're the way they talk about themselves can sound too brash or too arrogant, they don't want to exaggerate anything. So one of the things we spend a lot of time on, which Malt is a platform, can help people to look nice, but they still have to kind of decide how they're going to present themselves,
Yeah.
is making sure people are really emphasizing a lot of their core key skills.
Mhm.
Doing that, and that's obviously we'd love it if everyone did it on Malt, but there's there's multiple channels, including people's just own CV for that.
Sure.
I think that's the first step, at least for freelancers, before looking at kind of the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
But is just making sure that you're presenting all of your skills and talking about it in a way that is confident but accurate. It's very rare for me to see freelancers who are really embellishing with what they're sharing. Everyone tends to kind of tone it down a little bit. Some of it's cultural. I think most European countries have a culture of, in Dutch, we like to say do normaal, like be normal. Don't
Mhm.
don't exaggerate too much. So I say that's a first one as far as that goes, just something to watch out for when I'm talking to freelancers and how to develop. I think once freelancers are more experienced and more involved, I think the other thing is just really working on building and nurturing those relationships with their clients. And especially I think one thing that comes to mind is also just working on giving and sharing feedback. One of the things that we're talking about Malt internally, and we're going to have hopefully some content coming out later in a couple of months, is this concept of super teams. The most effective teams are a mix of fixed employees and the flexible personnel. Fixed
Mhm.
employees have a lot of institutional knowledge. They're there for the long haul. Freelancers bring that fresh perspective, and they tend to be early adopters of new technology.
Mhm.
And so they're the ones who can really help with change management or testing new things, driving innovation. Now, why I'm talking about this with, how can freelancers position
Yeah.
themselves? It's because I think freelancers shouldn't be afraid to both, in a constructive way, give feedback, share ideas, and help to drive change. But at the same time, also make sure you're asking for it from a client. Clients are always rating freelancers after every project, so that feedback does get there.
Mhm.
But I think there's good opportunities for sit downs and feedback meetings. And we actually have a lot of content we've created and guidance for clients on how to properly manage freelancers, since it's not an
Yeah.
employee employer relationship, but there's still things around feedback, guidance, expectation management, et cetera, that are really key. So I think for the entry levels, just make sure you don't hesitate to position yourself really clearly and
Mhm.
boldly. With your skills. And I think as you're more experienced working with clients, it's really investing in that client relationship and not being afraid to work on introducing changes and potential improvements, as well as actively seeking feedback.
Yeah. Definitely. It's like, yeah, and I don't want to, temper on that conversation as you mentioned around freelancer versus not freelancer, all the legal implications of that type of stuff. But I suppose it's trying to find that that perfect line of making sure that the things that you can provide your freelancers and support to the client base enables them to do as much as they can without physically crossing that barrier of or and risk of that sort of co-employment or that direct relationship, so that people still have their freedom and autonomy. And it's probably quite a difficult line
I
to
think it
walk.
is. I think it's a lot of it comes down to also just effective management practices. Like
Mm,
most managers, whether you're dealing with a fixed employee or a contractor, the most effective thing you can do is really focus on driving someone towards the objective. So
mhm,
having that be really clear, having the expectations be really clear, and then giving feedback on things that may be acting as an obstacle to that. With a
mhm.
freelancer, there's very rare circumstances where you'd be talking about the hours they need to work or how they need to get to that end result.
Yeah.
Um, and that's freelancers choose for that flexibility because they want to determine that themselves.
Mhm.
However, I think good communication from managers on a part of that is a key part of that, and getting that done from the client side.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And just going back to the sort of general, I suppose what the next sort of 2 3 years looks like Molt strategy obviously is aligned on where we think the business is going, right? As in, I say the business, I mean the industry. Again, don't love using that word, but it is what it is. Um, but where are you personally seeing things shift? Like, are there things that you as a business are focusing on in the short term? I know you mentioned a few things, but to because you're seeing a certain shift in the way businesses are bringing in talent.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of shifts that we're seeing. So the first thing is just the growth of freelancing in general, how more and more workers are choosing for that.
Agreed.
In our surveys and studies, most of them don't want to go back to fixed employment. But the other thing to keep in mind is just for organizations who are maybe hesitant to include freelancers in the mix.
Hmm.
Um, if you think about a labor market, the people who, broadly speaking, have the highest skill sets, the most experience, the best talent, the most scarce knowledge, whatever,
Hmm.
they are best positioned to take the risk to be self-employed, which
Correct.
means that there's actually a lot of really elite level talent out there that's freelancing. And if you're not
Hmm.
including that in your mix, you're just missing out on that pool.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we're seeing more and more large corporations who frequently tended to be the most averse to change on this stuff, the most skeptical about freelancing, growing in their usage of freelancers because of blended teams, or what we like to call super teams, where
Hmm.
freelancers and fixed employees are coming together. So that's kind of just a broader industry trend change that we're seeing. Some of the stuff that we're focusing on and change that we're trying to drive and just consistently seeing positive feedback back from people is really being freelance first in our mentality, focusing more on how we take care of them. Freelancers in some markets do pay a small fee to Malt,
Hmm.
but the vast majority of our revenues that we generate is coming from the client side of things.
Agreed.
So it can kind of create this interesting tension for us because that's not where the money comes from, but our key stakeholder is the freelancer, and we really hold true to that with our decisions.
Okay.
Technology wise, there's some other things that we're looking at. So we realize that there's a lot of tools out there focusing on databases, talent pools. There's not as
Hmm.
much stuff out there for freelance management and how you do that. So that's why we have this whole thing called freelance management system. You're starting to see more talks about an FMS in
Hmm.
industry publications and things like that. In the Netherlands, there's a publication called Zipconomy that first they released a report in Belgium, and I believe they're working on a similar one if they haven't already published it for the Netherlands on that topic.
Hmm.
Then there's more kind of malt specific things that we're looking at. I think the biggest hot topic that everyone's discussing is AI.
Hmm.
So we have some early investments in that. We've been using AI quite a bit for years with our algorithm. We have 10 years of data to try and help people provide the perfect match when they're conducting a search on our website through our platform. So that's already happening. But then the question is, okay, how can we go further with it? Broadly speaking, I think are one of the things that we'd like to see happen with AI, and this is an investment of years. So I don't want listeners to expect this to happen today if they're logging into Malt. But what we'd like to see happen with AI is that Malt as a tool starts to feel more like having your own personal kind of freelance recruitment consultant and
Hmm.
assistant, where they're helping you to find those perfect profiles. Or if you're a freelancer, create your profile effortlessly and have it look great as soon as you log in. And then managing those projects and having that data throughout that, where you're not investing a lot of time, because we're already kind of disrupting certain things, I think, in how things go, because most on the client side, and this ends up impacting the freelancers quite a bit. Most of what they're used to doing, even if they use a VMS, is sending an email to a recruiter, whether it's in-house or externally, saying, I'm looking for this, and having CVs either emailed to them or uploaded into the whatever system they're using. And that's it. So they're doing very little other than looking at CVs. And
Yeah.
we're trying to empower people to have more direct choice themselves,
Hmm.
which is actually faster with a better end result. And the freelancers end up also feeling more like they're more part of that conversation. And imagine if we can use AI to have it feel like there's like a expert personal assistant also guiding you along the
Hmm.
way. That's, I think, long term where we want to go
Yeah.
with what we're trying to achieve technology wise.
No, that's great. Well, you're going to be behind the curve if you're not looking to utilize it, right? It's it's almost to a point now where I think I'm not sure about you. I've talked about it so much and it being this new thing. It's not a new thing anymore. It's actually part and parcel. It's almost like five plus years ago. Everyone was talking about how great the UI needs to be and how amazing the UX needs to be, and it's like, no, no, no. That's the standard now. You need to hit a standard of having an appealing UI UX. So let's stop saying it's an innovation. So I'm interested at some point when this discussion about AI will stop being a discussion about innovation, and it's part of what businesses have to do. So,
Yeah, I think AI is really already well on its way to being a hygiene feature. I
yeah.
don't think it's there yet, just because there's so many things that everyone is still learning and doing. Um, but if I had to make a prediction, I would guess that in 2 or 3 years, if companies it's, including AI isn't something that differentiates you as much as the absence of it will probably cause you to lose on the market, whether that's attracting more freelancers to your platform or clients.
Definitely, definitely. Who knows? 2, 3 years down the line, if I'm still doing these podcasts, I might just be speaking to an AI bot. I'm not speaking to you. So, you know.
The robot will have come for my job.
The dreaded robot. Um, oh wow, it's I'm really impressed with what you're doing as a company, and the reason for doing this is I believe that there are not enough companies that really truly understand how to best utilize freelancers. Still, it's still very when you look at the spread of the freelance providers and suppliers out there, such as yourself, compared to some of the bigger MSPs and VMS platforms, it's still a very, very small part of the marketplace. And obviously that's because you can't cover every role, right? You cover specialist roles. You're not built to cover those high volume, you know, saying run of the mill jobs, but the jobs where there are more skilled people in those areas. You're really focusing on that quality talent. So kudos to you. That's great. So one final thing I like to ask, and I hope you don't mind me asking it, um, is around what motivates you as a person. Because a lot of work that I do, it's around software guidance and support, but I also do a lot around helping people with their motivation. So I think it's always nice to hear um, from people who join the podcast. Yeah, what gets you up in the morning? What keeps you happy? What puts that smile on your face? That type of thing.
That's a great question. I love having that as a question on this. Was not expecting that, but I do quite like it. So I think there's a few different things that really kind of get me going and excited. I think for me as a person, just broad interests, all things kind of technology, product, storytelling, and then if you combine
Mhm.
that with kind of economics, especially behavioral economics, I can nerd out about that quite regularly. So that kind of piques my interest, I'd say. But as far as kind of the core motivation things, the things that really drive me, it's really interesting to talk to people who are managers in different leadership positions.
Mhm.
Some of them may privately say they find it exhausting or they don't want to deal with the people stuff that much. They like having the strategy, the vision, and leading towards that, but dealing with people
Mhm.
side. Whereas, and this might be crazy, but I love the people side of things. I've been very lucky in that the people that I've managed have been stellar and easy to work with. So I think that may be causing a bias here. But for me, I think one of my core motivators, especially if I think about kind of my work life, is being able to work with people, nurture, and help them grow.
Great.
Just brings an immense amount of satisfaction to me.
Good. No, it's good. It's good to hear. And it's one of the traits of successful people, right? You've got to have a passion and feel belonging to something, right? And if people is your thing, that's great. Well, you know, if you put them down and say, it's you might have had great people to work for, but that might be down to you as well. You never know, right? So, but you seem a very humble guy, so I won't give you too much.
Well, it's hopefully I am sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, no, it's been really great today. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping people who are listening can sort of get a feeling of what's required to cultivate a really strong freelance network and find it useful on some of the tips and tricks, etc. So thank you, Dustin. It's been really, really wonderful talking to you, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been great.